Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Shouting from the Sidelines. You're just with me today, it's Luke from FootTech. We're going to talk today about joysticking. We're going to talk about what it is and why you shouldn't do it as a parent, coach or teacher, and some solutions to it as well. Really interesting subject this, because certainly in grassroots sport, it's seen a lot in football in particular. The sidelines, people on the sidelines, parents on the sidelines, shouting instructions and all sorts of other stuff that doesn't really help things, doesn't help your child, doesn't help the other children involved. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what it is, some solutions to it, some things you can do as a parent instead, and hopefully just give you a little bit of help and advice and some tips along the way in regards to this area. So joysticking is basically telling your child what to do, almost looking like a computer game. So you're controlling them with a controller on a computer game. Hence joysticking. We all do it. We're all guilty of it. Parents, teachers, coaches. It's just so hard sometimes not to tell our children, tell our players not to do something, or you want them to be able to do something in a certain way. So it's hard to prevent yourself from telling them what to do. And as I say, it's becoming, certainly as grassroots sport continues to grow, you're hearing it more and more. You're hearing people on the sidelines shouting. I mean, how many of us listening to this today can name a few parents, it might be ourselves, that are guilty of it? It's just so hard. It's so hard, particularly in children's sport. Certainly, sport brings it out the worst, I think. Because as I said, and look, I'm on this side as well. It's so hard not to do it. It just is. When you're in the heat of the moment, there's a football match, a rugby match, or whatever it might be, and your child is not doing something you want them to do or should be doing, or you want to help them, you start shouting instructions, and it's easily done, very, very easily done. But the reason for this today is just to explain the reasons why you should try not to do it and give you some ideas that you can use, which will mean better development for your children ultimately. And we wrote a blog about this a good few months ago now. It might have been a couple of years ago now, actually. And it created a little bit. There was one parent in particular, and it triggered them in a big way. We used a picture of Messi and Luis Suarez from Barcelona. There's a picture, if you Google it, they're sat on the sidelines at their children's football match, and feet up, chilling out, looking all nice and relaxed, and essentially just letting the children play. I guess the kids maybe play for Barca. And there's a coach there as well that you can see that's refereeing the game. Now, you've got two players there that probably know more about, well, certainly Messi knows more about football than most coaches, certainly children's coaches, you would think. And if anyone in the world would be the one to be shouting instructions, and possibly rightly so, it'd be Lionel Messi. But the picture just shows them relaxed, just watching the game, chilling out, laughing, and allowing the children to play. Now, we used that to articulate the point, and it triggered a parent, really. They weren't. I think we used the tagline at the end of the blog, something along the lines of, if it's okay for Suarez and Messi, it's okay for us. And I think they took sort of, not so much offence, but they just didn't like that. They were talking about how it's all right for them, they're millionaires or something or other. I don't know. It was a little bit of nonsense in there, but we used that picture to articulate the point that if you've got players like that are just prepared to allow their children to play the game, then surely we need to look at that as well and think, okay, they know a lot more than us, and they're allowing the coaches to do what the coaches need to do and the children just to play. Again, it was just used to articulate the point, but sport does bring it out the most, and possibly worst as well, I would say. A question to ask yourselves, and something that we talk about, is would you go into your children's classroom and start telling them the answers to the questions, maths questions, science, whatever? would you do that? And the answer is no. You want the children to work it out themselves. You want the teacher to you want to allow the teachers to help the children work it out themselves. So we wouldn't do that. And it's similar, it's the same, sorry, on a football field, a tennis court, a basketball court, whatever. It's the same principle. You've got coaches, in inverted commas teachers, who are there to guide and help our children find the answers to the problems, whether that be a problem about getting past a defender in football or how to hit an excellent forearm smash in tennis. So I don't know, but they're there to facilitate that. As a coach myself, believe me, I find it so hard not to tell my players what to do. But I have to stop myself now and try to take a step back and just guide them, let them discover it themselves because they remember it better, which is what we'll come on to in a second. But we've just gone through and still are in lockdown as at the time of speaking, where we're in the summer holidays. But prior to that, you've got homeschooling. And another question for you all would be, how many answers did you give your children during their homework, their homeschool work? And I wouldn't mind betting that a high percentage of you guys listening allowed your children to try and work those answers out themselves. And I've seen some children's maths questions. I don't think I could give them the answers anyway, but that's by the by. I wouldn't mind betting a lot of you have tried to at least allow them to work it out themselves and guide them. If they're struggling, you've guided them, you've prevented yourselves from giving them the answers. And that is the same in a sporting context. And I will talk a lot about football, obviously, as a football coach, and it's the same principle. We try not to give them the answers. Football's about building intelligence within the game and allowing children to come up with solutions to various problems within the football match. So we allow them that time to work it out. And as I say, I think with homeschooling, hopefully, a lot of you have seen that brings out the best in them. When they get it themselves, it's ingrained, it becomes ingrained in their mind. They've learned, they remember, as opposed to the answer to that is this, the answer to that is that. They don't remember that. They won't remember that. So yeah, I hope that sort of emphasises the point really in a different context. With regards sort of the reasons why we try to stay away from giving them the answers, is exactly what I've just said. It's allowing them to find these solutions. That's how we learn best. Think about us as adults now. Whenever we're trying to learn something new, I've been trying to pick up the guitar for a few years now and keep putting it off and going back to it and things like that. But the stuff that I've remembered is the stuff that I've gone out and looked at myself and tried to, looking at YouTube videos or whatever and having tutorials and being shown what to do and allowed time to practice that. Anything else that we do as adults in a work setting or whatever, we learn best from trying. We learn best from doing and finding those answers ourselves, I suppose. As opposed to just being told that and that. I think we all learn better doing that. And children certainly need this at a young age as their brains are still developing. We learn from mistakes and again, that's the massive thing for children. Anytime they make a mistake, whether it be major or minor in any sort of context, they'll remember that and they'll learn from that. And that's where this comes back. If we're not allowing them to make mistakes because we're so uptight about making sure they do everything first time and correct and so forth, they aren't going to learn anything. We learn from mistakes, and the more mistakes children are allowed to make at a young age, the quicker they will learn from that. Clearly, if they're making the same mistake over and over and over again, then yes, there's a time to intervene and there's a time to instruct more, I guess, and tell them the answers a little bit more. But before that, you need to invest more time in allowing them to make those mistakes. That is massively important as a coach, parent, or teacher. You won't always be there to help them. That's the other thing. You won't always be around to help them as a child and adolescence, into adulthood. You're not going to be there all the time. You can't be. As much as we'd love that, we're not going to be there all the time for them. So at a younger age, if you've allowed them to make these mistakes themselves and learn from those mistakes, then as they get older, it's helping them build that resilience, that mistakes aren't a massive issue. They can learn from them, and they can develop other ideas from those mistakes. It gives them some independence, which in turn builds resilience, which is huge. It's something we talk a lot about on this podcast. It builds that resilience in them, which is going to help them later in life. So giving them the answers and holding the hand through every single thing that we do from early childhood isn't going to help them in the long run. Certainly not. Regardless of sport, in life, it's not going to help them. So give them that independence, allow them to make these mistakes. Again, looking at it from a football perspective on the sidelines, we don't need to be shouting at them all the time, and we'll come on to a little bit more of that in a second. Allow them to make those mistakes in that area, and let them learn from it. With that resilience comes confidence. With those mistakes comes confidence in the longer run, because they realise that that's something I've done. I've learnt from that, and I've got the answer now, and that just builds that confidence. And we all know it's probably the number one thing we want for our children. We want them to be happy and so forth, but having confidence with what they do is huge, and this will help them build that confidence. So those are certainly reasons why we don't want to do it. And above other things, it's quite off-putting. You look at it from a football perspective and a sport perspective. A 7-year-old child in a football match being shouted at constantly, they're not going to enjoy it for a start. Quite embarrassing, I guess, as well, especially if you are that parent that's doing it all the time. It's not going to be nice for that child. Their friends on the team are probably going to get quite annoyed as well. When you're trying to concentrate on something, if you've got somebody shouting at you and telling you what to do all the time, we wouldn't like it. We wouldn't like it if we went to work and I'm constantly berated by our boss or whatever, telling you what to do and what you're not doing right. If I'm coaching on the sideline, I've got somebody in my ear telling me what I'm not doing. It's off-putting. We don't like it, and that's the same for children. It's not a nice experience for them. It confuses them as much as anything as well. The one that I hear all the time is find space. For a 6-year-old child, find space means nothing. It means absolutely nothing if they've not been shown that by a coach or whatever. It's nonsense, and it's just because we hear these buzz phrases that everybody seems to think, find space, find feet, get rid. Just don't. It just confuses them, particularly if you've got a coach that's worked so hard through the week on a certain thing, or for many months, trying to get the players to play in a certain way, and then you've got a parent telling his or her child to do something completely different. It just annoys the coach as well, and just everything falls apart. And the coach might not get it right. We don't get it right all the time, whatever. But if we've got a way of playing that we want to play, then confusing your child by telling them to do something different is going to do nothing but annoy the coach and annoy the child. Ultimately, then you get to a point where said child doesn't want to do it anymore because they're sick of it. They don't enjoy it. They don't have these nice experiences. We've had a conversation recently with a parent on that, and it's heartbreaking to think that a child that might actually have a good future in sport is potentially going to leave because of a parent constantly shouting stuff from the sideline. So yeah, the enjoyment factor is huge, and if they're not enjoying it, then everything falls apart. So we had as well. It was a great conversation we had a few years ago with a parent, and fair play to him. He approached us and he said, "Look, I feel like I'm doing something wrong, and it's impacting my son in his football." And what it was, he was essentially being quite, to an onlooker, you'd think he was quite aggressive on the sideline. To him, he wasn't. He was just being over enthusiastic. But because he was getting irate on the sideline, his child was mirroring that, and was essentially very aggressive in the game, but over aggressive, committing a lot of fouls, getting sent off. And you're talking about a boy that was, I think, 9 or 10 at the time. For a child to be getting sent off at a football match is you need to be doing quite a lot to do that. And so clearly, this was a serious thing, and this was a good little player as well. And his dad approached us and asked, what's going on, and we spoke to him about what he's doing on the sideline. And there was a lot of it. There was a lot of instructing. There was a lot of shouting and aggression. And you know what it's like. Your son or daughter, the second they touch the ball and do something, a pass, a shot, an assist, a goal, they look at you straight away. And if all they're seeing is you foaming at the mouth, screaming instructions or shouting at other parents or whatever, what do you think they're going to do? They're just going to replicate that, or they're not going to enjoy it, whatever. And clearly that was happening with this boy. He was not enjoying his football, being over aggressive, and so we discussed it with the parent. And fair play to him, he went away and reflected on it. And I think it was about 2 or 3 months later, he approaches again and just said, whatever he's doing, he's working. And his son ended up getting picked for it was Leeds City Boys, actually, so that the sort of best school kids in the city, after a trial process, having a few months back, probably been so far away from that it was untrue. And it was great, and that was credit to the parent because they recognised that. But that's just an example of what can happen if you continue to do it, and maybe if you actually recognise you're doing it and stop. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into the reasons why we need to try and stay away from it. Solutions. So what can you do instead? And just a few things for you to think about, really. And certainly for us as coaches at FootTech, we're trying to do more of this now as well. And hopefully these will just give you a bit of advice. And clearly, please comment as well and let us know if you've got any tips on this as a parent, as a coach, or what have you. But the first one we'd say is praise. So instead of instructing through the game, praise. Now, if your child is doing something or not doing something that you're trying your best not to instruct them, praise them when they do it. So let's have an example. Let's look at one thing that you see quite a lot, particularly at younger end, is everybody runs for the ball. All the players run after the same ball. It's like a little herd going after it. If you're trying to get your child to understand space more, then praise him or her when he or she actually steps away from that crowd and does go into some space to try and receive a pass once their team gets it. Praise that, overemphasize that. Once they get that positive message that, actually doing that's a nice feeling because mum has just shouted well done, coach has shouted well done, they'll want to do it again and again and again and again. My granddad, who took me to I think every football match I've ever played, when I was a child I hated tackling, did not like tackling at all, and all he used to do was he understood that I probably wasn't blessed, shall we say, with a lot of technical ability at that time. So he knew that if he could help me maybe tackle a little bit more, then there might be a place for me on the team. And he literally, looking back now, he just overemphasized the positive message on that every time I did a tackle, just a little one, a little interception, whatever it might be. He just, well done, and it went over. And then after the game as well, do you remember that tackle you did? And he praised and praised and praised, and I just started feeling really good about that, and I wanted to tackle more. And then, lo and behold, as I went through my football as a teen and into adulthood, that became my game. I was there to tackle, there to win the ball and pass to the people that could play a bit more. But it got me into every team I played for. And this was a child that hated tackling at 6-7 years old. So that was it. That's an example. He just overemphasized those points, the points that you want to try and instill into your child playing sport. Be overly positive with it during the game, after the game, and then before the next game or train, practice, whatever it might be. Definitely worth considering that. I think it can be a powerful a powerful tool. Questions. So after the event, after the match, training, whatever, questions like, how do you think you did? What could you have done better? What might you do better next time? These things get your child thinking. They get them reflecting. And that's important. If they can do some self-analysis, that will help them learn. And you can maybe guide them as well. If you're looking at things that you think they should be doing, or the coach thinks they should be doing, you can guide them down that path as well. It may be that they've not been great at passing. They're quite greedy. It might be that it's, that time when you were dribbling at those two players and little Josh was open on the right hand side. What do you think you might have done there instead of getting tackled by those two? And just things like that, and just get them thinking about the game a little bit more and about their game. Really, really powerful again. That I think would help, and certainly things that we're doing more as coaches at FootTech is, instead of stopping the whole game, at the end we're pulling players out to say, what do you think there? Could you have done that? And so forth. It just helps instill their learning, and just overemphasizes the points, I suppose. Another thing that we're doing, particularly with our one-to-ones, is videos, so video analysis. Now, this isn't always going to be easy, and it isn't always going to be allowed at grassroots sport, for safeguarding reasons and so forth. I think some teams are using videos now. There's things like Huddle that teams are using. I know academies are using it more. So I'm not recommending that you turn up with your video and start doing this. But if you're playing in a team, if your child's playing in a team or a sport, and the organisation allows it, then or they've got their own video analysis stuff, then certainly be asking if you can see that for your child. The use of film, we're finding, particularly with the one-to-ones, is it's great to be able to send them the video and they can analyse certain things. So recently we've done a lot. I'm working with a boy that's about to go on some trials, and he wanted to work a little bit more on his crossing from the left. So we filmed him. We've allowed him to practice time to do it. We filmed him, sent him that, and he's gone home and looked and seen what he could do better. Really powerful. We're testing it at the minute, and it's yielding a lot of results. As I say, I know a lot of academies do it now, and certainly pros. A lot of pros do it in any sport. We've had Liam Harrison on the podcast. He was the episode 1 world champion Thai boxer. He does a lot of video analysis with him, but interestingly, his dad, when Liam was a child, used to video all their matches before things like that were banned. And it's interesting, Liam played at a very high level of football as well. He did really well with his football, and after a game, his dad would go home, they'd have their dinner, and they'd put it on the TV, and they'd just watch the game, and Liam would be saying, oh yeah, I could have done that, and I could have done this. And how powerful is that? How powerful was it for him to see this? And Liam, he was again semi-professional footballer before he decided to go Thai boxing, and I think was on Barnsley's books or one thing or another. So he was playing at a high level, or got to a high level. Would that have happened as fluidly if he hadn't have been able to analyse that instead? Possibly not. But it is powerful. But as I say, I know this is hard. We can't be turning up to football matches or grassroots sport and just filming. It's not allowed, and rightly so in a lot of cases. What you can do is, if there's a technique that your child is struggling with, shooting, passing, dribbling, whatever sport you're playing, you could take them to the park and film them doing it. Tell them to take 10 shots, film them from the back, the side, and let them analyse that afterwards. That'd be perfect, really. Particularly, it's great for technique stuff. So you can do it for anything. But yeah, you could take them there, film them doing certain things, ask them what they want to work on, or talk to the coaches and see what they think they should be working on, and go and film them doing it, and allow them to reflect on that afterwards. The other thing, which I think the last one is quite interesting. It's sort of getting around the joystick element. So as opposed to saying do this, do that, there's a great story of Frank Lampard. and his dad, Frank Lampard Senior, and the stories of him shouting at young Frank when he was in the academy and so forth, shouting at him from the sidelines, but he would use just one word, and it was pictures. And what he meant by that was scanning. So he was constantly scanning his shoulders and checking what was around him. Now, some would argue that's a little bit of joysticking, but it's interesting because clearly those two knew that word, and it was almost a trigger word. So instead of saying do this, do that, it was just a case of reminding him, and that word meant that Frank Lampard was consistently looking around, and there's videos of him doing it at pro level as well. It was, what a great player he was, but his ability to see what was around him and know what pass to pick and so forth was down to his scanning, and a lot of his goals were down to understanding where the space was. That is no coincidence with regards to his father shouting that to him. So what you could do is use a trigger word. So talk to your child and say, right, okay, well, maybe for the next couple of weeks, let's work on our scanning. Okay, let's see if we can do some scanning games. So do your best, be checking those shoulders and so on. But what I'll do is I'll just shout pictures, and when I shout pictures, you'll know then, won't you? To that, and again, some would argue it's slightly joysticking, but it isn't, as because you've spoke to your child about it beforehand. It just diffuses it a little bit, and it's less telling them what to do and more reminding them. So I think that if you are somebody that can't resist having a shout, I'd say that would be a better way of doing it, and particularly because it's agreed upon with your child. So it might be, again, scanning, head up, whatever. But little things like that, talking to them beforehand about it and working it out between yourselves. It's like a little team then, and they'll buy into that a little bit more. I hope that's helped. It's a tricky subject. It's a tricky subject for us all in education, sporting, academic and otherwise, but certainly as parents, we all do it. I'm not sitting here today on a pedestal. I do it as a coach. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to take some steps back from that. But if we can guide as opposed to tell, we're going to make more confident, more resilient children. We're also going to probably make better sports people as well, because they will be able to find these problems, the solutions to these problems themselves, and that is what we want. That is where the learning is done. I hope that's helped. As always, please comment. Please let us know what you think. If you've got any ideas, any tips, if you agree with us, if you don't agree with us, always keen to have your feedback. Always keen to know as well, is there anything that you would like to know on these podcasts, anything that you need help with? So please feel free to comment or drop us a line. And thank you for listening.